G'day everyone and welcome back. This week we're going to have a look at making some more terrain, particularly our radio towers that you would have seen at the start of the video. For this we're going to have some pretty simple materials, our long mini paddle pop sticks, some matchsticks, our PVA wood glue there, and you might just want a little piece of foam, just some scrap will do, just for the top. Now we might be pushing the limits of easy on this build. There's nothing too complicated about it. It does take a little bit longer than some of the previous builds, but what we end up with at the end is pretty good. Now with these mini paddle pop sticks, when you get them they do have the rounded ends. I've just taken these ones and just trimmed those ends off. You want to try and keep them as long as possible and as close to the same length as you can. We can trim them up a little bit later on down the track, but make sure you cut off those rounded ends. Now for the next step of this, to set up the build, it's a lot easier if you do have a mat that has these lines over it, just so you can line up all four at the same time, the four sides that we're going to build. This just takes out the guesswork of where to put each of the braces into these sides, so the matchsticks that we're going to glue down, rather than having to measure off the first one each time, we can just use the lines on the mat to make sure that each one is being built roughly to the same dimensions for all our bracing that we're going to glue in here. So once you get these all lined up on the line, again just making sure that the bottom and the top are at the right spot, so you want them to be equal distance apart at the bottom for all four. You can see these ones here, I've got them at about 4 centimeters apart, and the tops are meeting. You don't have to use these dimensions. I did make a different one which you can see at the start and at the end of the video here, which was at slightly different dimensions. So I think it was 5 centimeters wide at the bottom, and I left a gap at the top so that I had a bigger platform at the top of the tower. You don't have to do that. Again, you can use whatever materials you've got on hand to make this, and you can use whatever dimensions suit your terrain. I found these dimensions were pretty good. Either one, the 4 centimeter base or the 5 centimeter base, works just fine for this. As you can see in the photos, they both look really good. So just lay it out, and so long as you've got all four sides the same dimension, I don't think it's really going to matter how you build these or what angle you put those uprights at. So the first one you can just build however you like, whatever looks good, and the following three we'll just try to replicate that for the last three. So with the first one, just start gluing down however you want. You don't have to use the same bits I did. I've started with a bit of paddle pop stick at the top, and for all the rest I'm just going to be using matchsticks all the way down. I found it easiest with a pair of tweezers and a small puddle of PVA glue on a piece of scrap foam or something. That way you can just dip the ends in before you glue it down. Now there's no real easy way to do this. There's no right way either, I don't think. It's whatever pattern you want to put on there should work. This pattern works really well for the look of it, so feel free to replicate this one. I'll use your own. You do want to try and make sure as you're gluing these on that these matchsticks aren't going all the way to the edges of or the outside edges of those uprights, because when we come to glue the sides together, those matches will the width of those matches will probably interfere with the other ones on the other sides. You'll get a clearer picture of what I'm talking about later on down the track, but like I said, for now just remember, don't glue these all the way to the outside edges of those uprights. Try and leave a gap along that outside so that when we come to glue the sides on, there is a bit of room for the matchsticks all the way around. So as you can see here, I am just going through and cutting these and gluing them down to make that pattern that I want on there. I'm increasing the step all the way down, so it's getting slightly larger all the way down there. Just feels like that's the way they look in real life, so I've tried to get that going as well with these ones. And so that's it, the first one's done. Now all you got to do is when you're making the next three, just make sure that you're lining it up pretty much with the lines on the board as they correspond to the other to your first created side there. You can see there I've finished all three of them. We do have some warping in the uprights, so the best idea there is just to grab something with a flat bottom on it, the shipping container here that we made in the first episode would be perfect. I'll put a link to those above. So yeah, just put something flat on those until they dry. Once they're finished, they're pretty good. There's still a little bit of bendiness in these paddle pop sticks, so don't sweat it too much. The next step is just to make sure that all these are the same length. There you will notice that there's going to be differences in these, so this is the perfect time for us to trim those up so that when we do glue it all together, the top is flat for gluing on our little platform. So the snips are perfect for this. These garden shears lets you to cut through nice and slowly. It doesn't snap through that wood and potentially break things as you go. So just go through with the 4 of these and make sure they all are roughly the same height, and then we'll get stuck into looking at gluing that. So the next step of the process, we're actually going to use some hot glue. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with hot glue, so I am using it in this step. You could probably use PVA glue. It will be a little bit more difficult for you to get this to glue together, just because of the working time of that PVA. Things are going to be falling all over the place while you're waiting for it to set. But if you can prop it up somewhere nice, you should find that PVA glue will work okay. Now, as I've gone to glue these in, I've noticed that those matchsticks are still interfering with each other a little bit. So all you need to do is just grab your craft knife and just go in there and just trim some of those matches a little bit shorter where they might be interfering with the other wall that you're trying to attach. This isn't too hard, it's really quite simple. The matches are easy to work through if you've got a sharp knife. So you just run the knife through and then just pick off those little extra bits. And then you'll find that the 4 sides will match together a lot nicer, and there'll be less gaps to worry about in the corners. So just go through and get that sorted out, and we can start the glue up process as soon as this is done. So as I mentioned, I am definitely going to be using hot glue, and that'll allow us to get this stuck together really quickly. The bond should be fine to hold it all together. You can go back with some and coat this with some PVA or some Mod Podge or something to give it some extra strength. I didn't really feel it was needed. Once I got these hot glued together, they seem to hold pretty well. It's a bit hard. These are pretty big pieces to be working on with the hot glue, especially trying to put it all the way down. So make sure you are working pretty quickly here. So make sure your hot glue is ready to go. You don't need an extra stick in there to get the beads that you want on there, because stopping at any point will cause this glue to just dry up, and then you just have to go in and peel it off and have another go at it. So try to make sure your hot glue gun there is ready with plenty of glue in it. And you want to make sure your top and your bottom line up so the 2 uprights are lining up pretty well. Now you want to try and make sure this sets at a right angle for these 2 pieces, and we're just going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the next one as well. So I glued these 2 as 2 pieces and then glued the 2 together. The first one I made, I just went through and glued each side on separately and came around to the 4th side, and it was fine. Unfortunately though, the camera has died in the next couple of seconds, so I didn't capture the end of the glue up for this, but I mean, you get a sense of exactly what I'm doing here. The next step after this is just to add some hot glue onto both sides of one and then push them together, and you will end up with a 4-sided tower. Now unfortunately, like I said, the camera did die, so I didn't get the footage of making this little platform for the top, but all it is a small square of foam board with some paddle pop sticks hot glued to the sides of that, and then I've hot glued that down to the top of the tower. Now I want to put a couple of little aerials on this tower as well, so I've got myself actually a little lollipop stick there which is hollow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick that into the top of the tower, and then I'm going to use that little 3mm LED, that little blue one, and I'm going to put that into the end of the lollipop stick, and that'll be my little warning beacon on the top. Now the lollipop stick, sorry, is a little bit too big to go down through the foam board, so you will need to sort of put a little hole in there with a toothpick or something, just so that you can mount this in there without breaking that foam board away. You'll notice that if you've got hot glue dried on the bottom of that foam board, it's a little bit hard and a little bit tricky to get through, so you'll need to make sure you pierce right down through with that toothpick and make the hole big enough. But once you've got that mounted in there, you could probably use hot glue for this. I was over my hot glue for the day. I had more than enough burns on my fingers from putting that tower together, so I'm going to use some PVA this time. Honestly, I got annoyed waiting for this to dry, so I probably should have used hot glue. Never mind, it's all good. So once you've got that in there, I put a couple of extra aerials in there as well, just another one beside it, just slightly shorter. For that I've just used the end of the toothpick. It looks pretty good. You could add more onto there if you wanted to. I am trying to work out a way to make some little radar dishes, which I think will look really cool on the side of this as well. I might post a bit more of a video about that another time. You'll also notice that one of the other tower I made actually has some speakers sort of on the top, or some PAs at the top, so they were a bit tricky to make. I will possibly do another video later on down the track where I'll show you how to make those. It's really not too hard. It's just some cereal box cardboard and hot glue. As I mentioned, I had burnt my fingers more than enough for today to try and attempt those again. But with this one, with the slightly larger platform at the top, I've just glued some small scraps of foam board on there as well, just to add some extra shapes. And those two speakers, as you can see, they don't look too bad. They were a bit of an experiment. I think I'll probably try some more. They look pretty good on there. I haven't finished painting that by any means, but that was just to give you a bit of a sense of the different dimensions of that tower and the different top that I've made with those little speakers on there. Like I said, I'll try and do a video of that maybe down the track. For the bigger tower, I did make a base. You certainly don't need it to make a base for these. They'll stand fine on any table as they are. I just wanted this one to have something a little bit different down the bottom and a little bit of extra weight. So all I've done is just a small piece of MDF, and then I've just used some techniques from my previous videos. So the little beams, steel beams that we made from the tank traps, I've got some concrete in there, which is just some chips of foam board that I've glued in, and a piece of corrugated paper. So for the concrete, you can see that how we did that when we made those concrete barriers. So I'll put a link to that at the top of the screen for you. So that's basically it. From here, you'll just paint it however you like. I don't think you really need to hit it with Mod Podge. You probably could strengthen it up a little bit with some of that if you wanted to. I didn't really need to. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you've been able to get something from this video. Please like and subscribe. I will hopefully have another video out next week. Thanks very much. Have a good one.